Gord Johns is the Member of Parliament for Courtenay-Alberni with the NDP, and he's joining us on the line right now. Sir, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me on.
Great to get you here. Now, we're talking about Food Banks Canada, talking about more and more people using the food banks, and that employment insurance is not enough to help out in a lot of these cases, and it's bringing the topic of EI reform up to the forefront, and we wanted to get a sense of this from you. What's your sense of this?
Well, first, it's pretty troubling to hear that almost a quarter of people in Canada are living in homes that are experiencing food security. That is totally unacceptable. And we had the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the right to food come to Canada almost a decade ago, and the rapporteur concluded that hunger in Canada is fundamentally an income issue. And Food Banks Canada, they reached a similar conclusion in their most recent report that, people can't access income supports when work disappears, that food insecurity rises, poverty rises, and reliance on food banks rises. And so, we really truly understand that the right to food starts with income security, and employment insurance is one of the most critical and important income security programs that the federal government has to offer to help, protect people and support people. And, right now, Food Banks Canada, in their report, they highlighted that the biggest labor market gap is employment insurance, and that the system's totally outdated. It's built for a labor market that doesn't even exist today.
Explain why. In what way does the EI not reflect modern work?
Well, let's talk about that. So, the EI system, today it was designed for, a post-war economy where most people work full-time, most people work year-round, most people work for a single employer, most people had stable schedules, and most people, moved directly from employment to unemployment. And Food Banks Canada, in their report, they argued that labor market no longer exists, that today's workforce includes gig workers, contract workers, temporary workers, seasonal workers, and workers juggling multiple jobs, and people with fluctuating schedules, and younger workers entering, precarious labor market. And the result is EI, increasingly, works best for workers in traditional employment, but excludes many of those workers that we're talking about facing the greatest instability.
But how does that work? I'm trying to get my. I'll have to admit, I never went on EI, so I don't know how it works. But if you are a gig worker versus like a full-time employee, I know if you have a job at a mill and the mill shuts down, you get to go on EI. What if you're a gig worker? How does EI work for you?
Yeah, so let's talk about eligibility. Right now, that's what Food Banks Canada is highlighting as the central problem. Access is currently it's based on accumulating insurable hours within a fixed period using regional thresholds. So it varies in region, can be anywhere from 420 hours to 700 hours depending where you live. It doesn't really reflect on how Canadians work. So again, back to that irregular kind of work, gig work, part-time work, contract work, frequent transactions kind of between jobs, that a lot of people aren't qualifying, or when they do qualify, their EI now is shrinking in terms of what they're getting, in terms of what they're surviving on. So, what we're saying is that, and we see this, when people lose their employment or lose their hours, their income drops, their rent can't be paid, they groceries still have to be bought, they still have to pay their utilities and other things. So, the temporary jobs loss, lands in, people in inequality. So what we want to do is see EI reformed. We want to see EI where there's a stable set income. Right now it's 55% of your insurable earnings. So often that's not enough to keep pace with the cost of living. So, Food Banks Canada is saying, hey, it should be, first, it should be a national 420-hour threshold, and it should be a minimum amount of money that gives people a chance to survive.
What would the process of making reforms look like?
Yeah, so first it needs to be a willing move by the federal government. We've seen them, raid EI often and the funds that people pay into. But they need to make sure that there's fairness, because all these gig workers, these part-time workers, these people working multiple jobs, they're all contributing right now to EI. And then they're not able to access the benefits that they paid into. So that should be fundamental. like there should be fairness, especially right now when we see what's happening. Like, I just highlighted 1 in 4 Canadians are living in a home with food insecurity, and food bank use has doubled since 2019. That says a lot. Unemployment, obviously it's elevating. It's getting higher, especially youth unemployment, which is rising sharply. And affordability pressures, they're getting more and more severe as we're seeing the cost of groceries, the cost of, gas at the pump, or when you're at the bank, your bank fees are going up, your telecommunications access to the internet are skyrocketing. EI, it needs to meet the crisis that we're in, and we need to make sure that it's available to people that are paying into it, that aren't even able to access it because of the criteria that's set out right now that's excluding many gig workers, many part-time workers, many young people especially.
So you'd like to see this reform to EI. It should be modernized, you say, to reflect the changing face of work. We got more part-time work, gig work, different things that aren't just a full-time job at one company for your whole life that we used to have back when this thing was set up. Now, is there like we're out of time. We got to leave it here. But like, is there a proposal in Parliament that you would make, or like how would this actually change? Does the NDP have to push this forward, or what happens here?
Well, right now we have an AI minister. The AI minister needs to not just look at how AI can, improve the quality of lives of people, but also that, that they're creating benefits based on the jobs being replaced by people to support people in transition. And that's not happening right now. The question isn't, whether people, should be able to qualify for EI, but also whether the benefits are sufficient to prevent poverty. And we need to listen to the experts. And Food Banks Canada, they're experts. They're on the front line, dealing with people that have food insecurity. They're saying that this is one of the top issues for them is EI reform. So we're calling on the federal government to modernize the employment insurance system, so that fewer Canadians rely on food banks. And that's absolutely essential. And we're going to be pressing them in Parliament. I just raised this in the House of Commons yesterday, or the day before yesterday. So I'm going to continue to do so this week and next week.
Well, hey, thanks for diving into the issue with us here. Much appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on.